Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Stay Rich podcast. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to a friend of mine, a highly qualified, certified financial litigator, a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. He hasn't told me if he's won an Academy Award yet, but I'm sure he will soon. And one of America's ranked best lawyers, best family lawyers, hailing from Chicago, Illinois. Jordan Rosenberg, welcome to the Stay Rich podcast.
All right, Ryan, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Welcome to the show. And I'm so excited to have you on today to discuss various matrimonial law issues, the kind of stuff that you see in your practice, and any sort of advice that you can give to guys going through this process, because I know it's hard for them to reconcile with what's happening often.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I'm fired up to be here, and it's just so interesting, the whole divorce realm, and it's really multifaceted, right? So you're experiencing a emotional trauma, financial trauma, and you're just, I mean, you don't know which way's up. So to me, any guidance in that regard is huge, and I commend people for reading your book and taking your master class and consulting with you, and it really just educating people is so important. And having someone who's educated that comes into the process is huge. Now, of course, you gotta, don't chat GBT everything, don't Google everything, because then you're gonna ultimately go sideways. And it's one of those things where, you get a scrape on your knee, you chat GBT it, and now you've got some terrible death-defying illness. So just make sure it's all with your lawyer on those things. But yeah, I mean, having the education as a background and kind of staying up on it and staying rich, so to speak,
Thank you.
is really, really important. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you. And I mean, you just touched on something that I find really interesting is AI and how it's impacting different industries around the world. And I know that the area of family law, it's certainly starting to make its way into. What's been your experience with clients dealing with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It definitely is interesting, and I think at least for us as lawyers, we use it a little bit, and we have like these closed circuit AI connections through the major, Westlaws or LexisNexis and stuff like that, which is basically a kind of a slower, more thoughtful chat GBT that's not giving all your information to, whoever is controlling it. But it's helpful, and it certainly helps streamline our research efforts. It helps streamline, sometimes, with, responding to letters and putting together letters and just kind of streamlining things, which is helpful, and just like everybody else uses it for. What I see it more so as is our clients love AI and they love ChatGPT. And a lot of the times, I'll get emails from clients that are, I mean, you can just tell immediately they're ChatGPT'd, It's like they're super organized exactly how it is. And it's like, it's hard to like respond to those because that it's not really them asking the questions. You know what I mean? And I'd
Mm,
much rather say, look, put together your little outline from ChatGPT and get all your thoughts and everything together, but let's have a discussion. Like, come on, you're my client, you're a person. Like, we don't need to be so robotic, no pun intended, to ask our questions and sort of establish that relationship. And if you have a question, let's air it out, So to me, that's really where I've seen it with our clients is they kind of do correspondence with us. They make comments with things that we give to them. They're doing their own research and, only God knows what type of information they're getting, but they get sort of the extremes, and it's sort of our job now to kind of rein them back in and be like, yeah, I get that that's a possibility. It's not likely, or it is, so it kind of makes our job a little bit more difficult in terms of setting expectations, because it kind of gives people an outlet to say, here's what's all the possibilities look like.
yeah, and I mean, I've used ChatGPT. I use it for, certain things too, just in my practice and just, what I'm doing with this whole channel and everything like that as well. And, I experience the same thing where it's like you get information and some of it is good, but unless you know like really how to work it, like really how to ask questions, really how to like put it in a certain role, it can give wildly misleading advice and misleading sort of takeaways from what you're trying to ask. Is that sort of what you're facing with clients now?
I think so. And there's a lot of new, even like published cases now in Illinois that, you could tell that, lawyers got smacked for using ChatGPT because ChatGPT, cited a case that was not correct or didn't stand for the right premise and stuff like that. So, for me, I get it. It's a great tool, but it certainly shouldn't be something you rely on. What it is really, really efficient at, and I'm sure like you, Ryan, it's a great organizer of dense information, and even a lot of business valuators that we work with here in Chicago and nationwide, they have an AI system where, they plug their, bunch of bank statements into some thing and it organizes them. I mean, to me, it's a great time saver and the product is really nice. Hey, I'm curious too, Ryan, if that's stuff that, if that's stuff that you work with too.
Well, I mean, I work with AI kind of to codify information. I'm looking at developing a tool for that for people going through divorces, just to sort of get all their information in the discovery process and like put it all in an organized file for, someone like you, and even start to pull in the financial information and provide some insight into what's going on, especially for self-employed, kind of entrepreneurs, whether they be, I mean, they could be a roofer for all I care. It doesn't really matter, but it's such a dense process to go through so many bank statements, so many financial statements, corporate tax returns, their personal tax returns, all this information. And having a system that could kind of just at least compile it in a way that makes sense would make this field so much more clear and transparent as a process.
You're right. I mean, like, there's this discovery process, and maybe our listeners aren't that familiar with it or whatever, but basically, the discovery process is literally just that, just finding information about your estate, putting numbers to things and entities and business interests and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, Ryan, in the beginning of the case, typically both sides issue what's called discovery, and it's produce a bunch of back documents, answer a bunch of questions. And so it's a pain in the ass, it's cumbersome, and it's very intrusive. And the next thing you know, I mean, you're, on your Chase account downloading years and years and years and years of statements and, sending them over to your lawyer. And so you're right. I mean, if there's a way to sort of streamline that process, I mean, that to me sounds super duper helpful.
Good. Well, I'll definitely reach out to you when that part's done. I mean, when you're dealing with discovering with clients that you have, I mean, what are some of the struggles that you face with them? I mean, I've found this personally, and maybe you have too, where there's almost like a reluctance or hesitancy to give information. I mean, it's like there's some sort of emotional barrier there with a lot of clients giving financial information for companies and things like that.
Yeah. That's sort of a complex answer is what I would say. And I'd say as a starting point is, especially if your marriage is not one that's a, transparent relationship where everybody has access to everything else, there's often this notion like, okay, well, why do they need to see my stuff? Who cares what my credit card statements are? Why, who cares how much I have in the bank account? This was my job. Like I carried all these things. I'm not, why does she or they need to see it? And I think as a general rule, I mean, at least in Illinois, what's called marital property, which is the divisible part of your estate, in order to ascertain what that looks like, you have to have full transparency. And regardless of if there's an asset in your name or your spouse's name, has to go on the balance sheet and you have to know about it because we have to know if it's divisible or not. So simply because you've got a bank account where you deposit all your income in doesn't mean that that other person is not entitled to a portion of that. And I think that's a really tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially on, the marriages in more traditional sort of gender roles where, this is my money. I earned the money. This is my money. And I think what a lot of people miss is it's our money, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
a really tough pill to reconcile and say, okay, I get it. So I think there's some hesitancy there in giving that. And I think secondarily is it again, like I said, it's a pain in the ass. It's a fucking pain in the ass. And especially for like more complex, estates with business interests and, profit and loss statements and balance sheets and QuickBooks and, different corporate structures, and I mean that's a lot of information that you have to pull and collate. That you, while you're pulling it, may question the relevancy. You're like, why am I going through this? This is silly. Like, I don't get it. Like, isn't it just is what it is? Well, yeah, except your spouse doesn't know anything about this,
Mhm.
right? And so, it's just a pain in the butt. But it's really important, at least in Illinois, there's that marital property, which is divisible, and non-marital property, which is not divisible, right? So non-marital property is property that you had before the marriage, that you got by gift or inheritance or some other statutory exception. So if you had a business before you got married and that business kind of stayed intact during the marriage, you're going to want, even if it's a 20-year marriage and there's some value to that business, you're going to want every document that you could possibly pull from the time of the marriage to show that you had that business before the marriage, what the operating statements looked like, is your interest the same? I mean, to me, that's huge and could pay massive dividends in a divorce proceeding. So kind of complex, but I think it's, that's why I think a lot of people struggle with it all around.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And it sounds like you're almost alluding to the idea that if you have a business and you're entering into a marriage, right? Like you made the decision, she's the one, I'm going all in, and I'm going to be happily married. Is that the time when you would suggest looking at something like a prenup or even a postnuptial if you've already pulled the trigger at that point to start, to derive these values and maybe even just exclude the business altogether from marital property?
I mean, a phenomenal idea, phenomenal idea. And I think, again, that's complex too. I mean, nobody gets married to get divorced. You know what I mean? And so I think having those discussions about, right, I mean, it's, the prenup is a great idea because that basically obviates any argument that it could be a divisible asset at that time. And it does your job for you 20 years down the line if you get divorced, because you've already got a document that says, this is my non-marital property. You can't touch it. Don't have to pull the documents. It's fait accompli, case over, right?
Yeah.
So it's awesome to have that. It's a tough conversation to have with your prospective spouse, most times. And, but I guess it's becoming more and more common. And I'd say, I don't know, maybe 10% of people now maybe get a prenuptial agreement before the marriage. And it's the exact circumstance that you're talking about, Ryan. It's like you've got a family business, you've got an interest in a business, you've got, a whole financial life before the marriage, and, you just want to make sure that that's protected so things don't get mixed. And you still have to hire a family law lawyer or, sometimes an estate planning lawyer. They do that. But basically, you can predetermine whatever the marital estate looks like. And if you're saying, look, everything but my business is marital, great. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility there in terms of, predetermining what that looks like in terms of when you get divorced.
So, like from your perspective, what would be some of the things that someone watching this, they have a business, they're considering marriage. What would be some of the things that they should consider putting into a prenup or making sure that they do so it wouldn't be successfully challenged at some point down the line?
Well, at least in Illinois, that's an interesting question, at least in Illinois, because there's not a lot of published cases, if any, that overturn the validity of a prenup where you have two parties with a lawyer with the appropriate financial disclosure. And so if you've got a business and you're thinking about getting married, I absolutely would consult with a family law lawyer, with a estate planning lawyer, and just understand what your unique rights are. But to me, it's also beyond just like checking the box and making sure you're protected and saying, hey, reach out to this person, reach out to this person. I think you have to be pretty open and honest with your spouse, soon to be,
Yeah.
and be like, dude, I've got this business,
Hopefully
right?
not, dude. Yeah.
It is. I mean, I don't, whatever everyone calls whatever, but it's like, look, I've got this business. I've worked hard to create this. If we get divorced, this is what I'd like to have as mine. And I think going into that with an open mind and clear expectations is really, really important as a successful foundation for a marriage. And if, I mean, to me, it's almost like a litmus test of the marriage. And this isn't legal. This is just kind of my opinion. Is if you can't have that frank discussion with your soon to be about some of the finances, you're not starting off on, a solid foundation to build your house of marriage at. So I think that's a really big consideration, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I've always, what do I call it? I call them hot marriages. So honest, open, and transparent. And that's sort of your, um, almost like the foundational part of it. And if you struggle with honesty, openness, and transparency, even just getting into the marriage in the first place, even just talking about the fact that you do have a business, you want to make sure it's protected, and you want to take care of her too, and sort of set out some sort of formula to make that happen. If that is so stressful of a conversation that it would cause your marriage, your pending marriage, to explode and that relationship to explode, I think you really do have to ask questions as to whether or not this is a viable marriage in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, the best example, which I kind of, started to talk about was like the building a house, and if your foundation is weak and, your basement isn't built out properly and the pipes aren't set and everything's ready to roll, you're going to have you're going to have perennial problems with your house and the structure, or it's just going to collapse altogether. So to me, it's like, I love that. I love the hot marriages, the open, I was the open transparency. I love that. And I'm stealing that from you, Ryan.
Good.
Um, but, but to me, that's super important. I think, like, to me, it's really that extends to the divorce process too. Is, your divorce process is going to be way quicker, more efficient, more, you're going to save a lot of time and money if you're not hiding information. And if you're being cagey about the information that you're producing and, well, why does she need this? Why does she need this? Who cares? Give the information, right? Because to me, again, that it sets you guys up for success. It leaves less to fight about. And the last thing you want to do is fighting about irrelevant things, without the appropriate guidance in court, and just spending a bunch of money and time just spinning your hamster wheel about nothing. So I
Yeah.
love that. And it's to me, that goes a long way, whether you have a business before the marriage with a prenup or even during the process. I mean, I think that's huge. And those are just basic tenets.
Yeah. And like in what circumstances would you suggest, so let's say somebody has, like, somebody's married at this point, right? And they're listening to the show, they're listening to you and all the advice that you've got. And at what point would you suggest looking at a postnup?
So post-nups are tough because there's not a lot of incentive to have the other side agree to something after the marriage, right?
Mhm.
So prenup, I guess, it's interesting to say this, and I hope it doesn't come off the wrong way, but the person who's asking for the prenuptial agreement doesn't have a lot of leverage if the marriage already happens, right? So if someone says, yeah, I'm not doing a prenuptial agreement, we'll just do a postnuptial agreement, after the marriage,
Mhm.
the consideration in the prenuptial agreement, a lot of it is getting married. Like, it comes into effect when you get married.
Mhm.
And so I think from a timing standpoint, it's one of those things where, you got to change your filter on your HVAC. Like, I got to do it. We'll get to it. But you kick it down the road, kick it down the road, kick it down the road, gets dirtier, 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 messier, messier, messier. And finally, 6 months later, you're like, oh, about that postnup. Well, what postnup, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's sort of a phenomenon that happens too. But also, if they're a little more difficult, and a lot of the times we see postnuptial agreements are with really special circumstances where the parties need to stay married for health reasons, or something like that, or if there's a pending, like, dissolution of marriage case,
Mhm.
and it's like, look, we're going to work on the marriage under these specific requirements, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and by the way, here's how this is all getting divided and what's happening in case it goes sideways. So that's really when we see postnuptial agreements. But other than that, I mean, it's just a different animal than a prenuptial agreement, because you're already into the marriage, right? And I think a lot of times the person who's receiving is like, well, why would I do that? Why would I do that now when we're already married? So I think
Yeah.
those challenges there.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it done successfully, and I've given advice to people that where it's worked, where it's more about like a trade-off, right? And recognizing that the leverage there is gone. It becomes the consideration is less about, getting married at the end of the day, but it's more like, hey, I've got this business, it's really important, and I'm not planning to get divorced. You're not planning to get divorced. It has to be when there's actual like personal goodwill there,
Yeah.
to say, hey, but I think it's important that we plan ahead, and I want you to feel like you have freedom to leave and be able to be taken care of no matter what. So if like one day you wake up and you say, screw this guy, he snores too much, I'm out. I want you to know that you can keep the house. I want you to know that you're going to get this much a month, on alimony, whatever the case may be. Child support will be calculated this way. We'll figure out my income this way. Blah blah blah. Here's sort of what you can expect if that were to happen. So that no matter what, you're secure. We're going to have a good divorce. I'm not going to treat you badly. You're not going to treat me badly. The kids will be great. And just for that, I really got to make sure that I can pay all these things that I'm setting up for you. So I'm just going to exclude the business end of this. I knocked my book over. I should keep it in the frame. But I'm going to make sure that I exclude the business end of this, in the post-nup, to make sure that I have control so that I can actually pay for this lifestyle for you going forward.
Yeah. I think that feels like a pipe dreamy type conversation, right? To be honest.
Yeah, it does.
I
I've
I-
seen it happen a couple times successfully, but I think it's one of those situations, probably in all practicality, when a lot of people are planning for, they're like, hey, I should do a post-nup agreement. The divorce is already like you said, it's pending, and it's like, we're gonna work on this, and this is what's gonna happen if it doesn't work. And if that discussion is being had at that time, there's no way in hell my suggestion on how to pitch this is going to work, because that personal goodwill is gone
gone,
at that
gone.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also one of those things, I mean, you could talk about in a therapeutic setting, and maybe that helps you, if it's important, where, I mean, we always tell our clients to do that. It's like, if you can have a referee that's a mental health professional to sort of like mediate that tough conversation,
Mhm.
that's a good idea too. And like a lot of the stuff we were talking about, it's like, how do you have these tough conversations with, your spouse or your prospective spouse? I mean, there's still stuff, it's hard. You're a person. Like, you have your own insecurities, you have your whole thing. And, I think to me, there's no shame in reaching out to a mental health professional and saying, look, um, whether you're having problems or not, there's a tough conversation that we just need help with. And, I can't get through the conversation without her crying. I can't get through the conversation without me escalating. We need somebody to kind of, broker this. And, maybe that's a good suggestion, not only with a post-nup, but with a prenup, or, for any big decision during a marriage. But I think there's no shame, certainly, in reaching out for some help for those type of conversations.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I think like, honestly, I think, how would I put it? We speak different languages, men and women, where it's like women talk in emotion, right? Like the words come out and the words are something, but really they're speaking to some sort of emotional truth that's there. So it's never about, necessarily the one request that's happening right now, or the one sort of criticism or critique or whatever you want to call it. But there's sort of like a deep underlying emotional, request that's being made that guys don't pick up on. Like, it'll be like, can you make me a cup of coffee? And the guy thinks, okay, I'll make a cup of coffee, like, task done, right? Like, that's it. But really, this is about like, oh, can you help more with things around the house because I feel this, and da 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 da. And there's so much more to that one simple little thing that it doesn't register with men the same way. And I often have to tell men this, where it's like, she's not saying this. There's so much more to what's happening right now, where you need to become really, really proficient at speaking womanese. Like, it's a totally different language. And if you're going to get her towards a settlement that's good for you and for her and for your kids, really importantly, it's not necessarily going to happen with just direct, like, bang, bang, bang logic speak. You kind of have to help to solve some of these emotional issues happening in the background.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, it's a good observation. And it's also like super important because not only is that example even just about the coffee and what it might really mean. And, some marriages are different than others. I mean, to me, it's like, what I tell my clients or my prospective clients is like, look, you have to be direct, and especially men. It's like you have to indicate, I can't read your mind. I can't, you just be, it's learning a new way to communicate with your wife, with your spouse, whatever. And it's directness because she can't read your mind. You can't read her
Yeah.
mind. So if everyone's just like hoping and expecting that somebody's going to do something based on a small sort of signal, I think that's really short-sighted. And while it's like nice when it actually pans out, it just doesn't always happen that way, right? And so I think it's that layered with just the emotion of divorce, you know, and children sprinkled in, and people's uncertainty with money and paying bills and stuff like that. I mean, it's a crackpot of chaos. I mean, it's that example on steroids. And I think especially as a divorcing man married to a woman, I think you really have to be patient and understand that they call it the divorce process for a reason. And everybody processes this process differently. And it
Mhm.
takes people, sometimes people get divorced. Say, okay, I'm ready, done. Don't care. My mind is off. I'm good to go. I'm moving on. Already dating. Don't care. Done. And some people, it takes a little bit longer, and it depends on the circumstances. And I just think you have to, in under ordinary circumstances, give your spouse a break sometimes.
Mhm.
And getting divorced doesn't necessarily always mean we're throwing off the gloves and throwing haymakers, right? I mean, more often than not, people can do this in an amicable way and something that makes sense for their family, that's not gouging them for fees and money and stuff like that. And to me, it's, and that's frankly how most divorces are. I'd say that 10% of the cases probably take up 90% of my time, you know?
Yeah.
But you really have to reset your expectations because it's a trauma and it's a process and everybody handles that differently. And I mean, it's even, I'm sure you see that with stuff internally with businesses and stuff like that and partnership disputes and, you know, stuff like that. I mean, maybe it's just like it's a
The
whole
same.
thing. So you just have to give, if you're really looking big picture, which is, hey, I wish you were doing more around the house, right? In that same context, if you can parlay that into the divorce process and even after the divorce process,
Mhm.
I mean, I hate to say that, Ryan and I are sitting here saying your life is going to be better, but your life is going to be better if you,
It is.
treat others how thy would like to be treated. Like literally the golden rule.
I think you know what too. Your life is going to be better. Um, that's kind of the point. I mean, if you're in a marriage and it sucks to the extent that one of you wants to divorce, like let's say you want a divorce. You want a divorce because your marriage sucks. So you file for divorce. The expectation is that the divorce takes the suckiness of your life away, not adds to it. And you have to think with that end goal in mind. And similarly, if she is the one who thinks that this relationship sucks, do you want to live with for the rest of your life with somebody who thinks that you suck and wants to leave you? I don't want that, right? Is
Right.
eventually this is gonna like that's going to become a much bigger problem. So maybe things are sort of tepid right now, but she wants to go. That's going to turn into a lot of resentment and hatred down the line. I don't want to tie myself into that for life, right? So the point of the relationship, or the point of the relationship is to make your life better. But the point of divorce is when that relationship sucks, is to improve your life. I mean, that's kind of the purpose at the end of the day. And
Right.
thinking with that as the end goal in mind to be like, how can I get through this? So at the end, my life is better, right? Not greedily, but realistically, how can I get through this so that my life is better? How can I mitigate the damage to my kids? Because it'll do some damage and make their life better. And ideally, if you're dealing with the mother of your children, you want her life to be better too. And
Yeah.
for men, that's hard, but thinking that through and going, okay, how can I make this happen? I think is useful and helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I also think too, I think it takes different people. I think it takes a while to get there. So what I always
Yeah.
tell my clients is when you on the day of your divorce, and now it's this, a lot of counties do this totally anticlimactic thing where you literally just submit the documents to the judge. Judge stamps them, you're done. Like you don't have to go to court anymore to get divorced, right? So it's kind of funny. I mean, you spend all this time and money and energy kind of getting your wedding together. It's this monumental moment, and all of a sudden your divorce is like done, right? So, so it's also like I just don't think anybody ever gets divorced and is like, oh, they never ever have that sense of like, finally, they never have that sense of, this was fair. There's always resentment towards the other person. And I mean, it's like, it never, you never get what you think is going to happen on your divorce day. You just never are going to ever get that. But I agree with what you're saying is that whether you asked for the divorce or receiving the divorce, I mean, the more hot you can be, right, during the process, the better, because even after, if you have little kids especially, I mean, you have to still go to their soccer games and their ballet recitals and like their graduations and grandkids and weddings and all kinds of stuff where, you're going to want to look across the aisle at your ex-spouse and be like, you know what? We did it. We're good. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And instead of like, oh my God, I can't look at her. I can't look at her. I can't look at her. I mean, your life is better just in how you go through this process. Not only that you're divorced, but that you handled it hot, right?
Yeah. 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 And that relationship will be better for it. I guess I should ask you this question. What are some of the major mistakes that guys make going through divorce that leads to it just exploding and becoming a total disaster?
So that's a great question. And I wish I had a 1, 2, 3 rip answer for you. I think if I was to do that just for purposes of trimming it down into a reel, how about that? So number one, I think is just unrealistic expectations. And I think having the right lawyer, having the right, discourse with that person and saying, hey, what can I reasonably expect from this? Because if you're the guy that thinks that your wife or your partner gets nothing out of this, you're short-sighted and you're going to get steamrolled and super frustrated,
Yeah.
right? So I think setting clear expectations with sort of how things work in your, county or state is the number one mistake people make going into this. It's just uneducatedly just saying, here's what I think. Okay. Number two, I think along the lines of what we were talking about before, is being unorganized and not being forthcoming with certain information. And I think that a lot of time and money is spent arguing about what the other person is entitled to for information that
Hmm.
doesn't get you anywhere except money to the lawyers, right?
Yeah.
So we were representing a business owner, and the business owner was very reluctant to turn over, internal business records. Why? Because, he's paying for personal expenses through the business. He's concerned about, how his, the valuation is going to come out or what his income is going to be, notwithstanding what's on his tax return.
Hmm.
And, he wanted to be coy and cagey about the production of those documents. And what I would tell him is that I was like, and this is me again, dude, right? This is stupid, right? She's entitled to it. You're going to have to turn it over. You're going to spend a ton of money, time, and effort going round and around and around just fighting over this when you're just going to lose. And to me, it's like, that's it. It's just turn it over. And if there's a legitimate objection to turning over the information, you'll coordinate that with your lawyer, right? And whether it's not relevant or whatever, or privilege or something like that. But to me, more the better. And just go, give it over. So number one, unrealistic expectations. Two is unwillingness to foreclose or disclose information. Um, And number three is, I would just say, I mean, I think those are two really good ones, to be honest. I mean, I also think that here's, I guess, a juicy one that I just kind of thought of, but give your spouse time to like heal. And what I
Hmm.
wouldn't do is you can get into another relationship, do what you need to do, go date, do your thing, but don't rub it in the other person's face. Right.
Good call.
And like, you don't need to post it on social media. You don't need to like tell your kids about it. Like, just stay mellow until you and under the radar until you kind of get through the process and things kind of sink in.
Good call. That's a good way to preserve your life too. Is not bringing your 18-year-old girlfriend over to meet your kids, like going through the
True.
separation and divorce process. That's not the
True.
time. You don't want to end up like shanked at dropping off your kids one day. Don't do that.
Agreed. Just don't do that. Right. And really, it's just common sense. I mean, it's like, it's hard when you're in the whirlwind of this whole process to like, try to connive and do things and be cute. Just don't. Like, don't be an idiot. Just don't be stupid, which is really the bottom line. Like, it's a moral compass. It's just like, give the information. Give the information. Don't, whatever. Just do it. Don't be stupid. It's sort of like the overall thing. And, don't try to play games because it's just going to cost everybody more time, money, and acrimony.
Yeah, yeah, such a key insight too. I feel like as men, we have this sort of like preconceived notion that we're good at certain things, right? So like one of them, we have like a natural inclination towards driving, like driving cars and stuff like that. Number two is that we're naturally physically more adept, so we're better at fighting, right? Even though chances are most guys are like not very good at fighting at all. And then number three, we have this idea that, somewhere internally we're master strategists, like chess grandmaster strategist, litigator kind of thing, where, I can go to court and I know how to make logical arguments and I know how to use the law and da 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 da, and I know how to play these games and stuff like that. But the truth is that the actual court system, the actual court process itself is very emotionally driven. And men are shit at figuring out emotions, like just terrible. And I don't think we have the tools to strategize as guys the same way that women have that sort of natural capacity to do things to emotionally rile up or settle down a situation depending on the intended outcome. So I've seen so many guys go down this path, and I end up talking to them later, where it's like they feel like they can strategize their way through this, and every single little thing is analyzed from 720 different degrees of analysis, and no matter what, it's like they automatically pick the wrong friggin' move to make because their ability just to make a good decision, the correct decision, is completely impaired by this sort of legal analytical framework where they think suddenly they are just amazing military strategists or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I've written some articles about narcissism and divorce as well, and that applies both to males and females. And I think when you're going through that process, male or female, maybe more so for guys, it's that fight or flight, right? And,
Mhm.
are you gonna fight? And, what lengths are you gonna go to kind of prove your point? And I think, to me, Ryan, I mean, it's kind of like buttoning it up almost perfectly, is like, you have to trust the process a little bit and realize that you don't have a lot of control over this process, right? And emotions matter because you're feeling how you're feeling. Your, your wife is responding to how you're doing things in a certain way that you don't have control over. And so at the end of the day, the only thing that you have control over, and you have to realize, regardless of where your mentality's at, is the only things you can control are your expectations and how you respond. And that's it. And I mean, I guess the other thing is what information you provide, right? So,
Yeah.
if it is, you have to just focus in these situations on things you can control. And, if you're one of those guys that was trying to control things during the marriage, or you believe that you were controlling things during the marriage, or she was controlling things during the marriage, it's just caught. You have no control over this process. It's, if you can agree, and that's a lot of control, but otherwise you're leaving your decision up to a judge, and you're riding your ponies as your horses to try to get you there. I mean, to me, it's, you have to disabuse yourself of this notion of like, I can be cute, I can be quick, whatever. It's just, you've lost control. So the only thing you can control your expectations, and how you respond.
Yeah, 100%. That's a fantastic way to look at it especially for guys. I mean, I think, well, maybe I'm gonna not offer my opinion now. I'm gonna ask you, do you tend to find, I know that you deal with both male and female clients, do you tend to find that the men are more in the emotional processing point when they're talking to you, or is it the women who are more emotionally processing it at that point?
It's a really good mix. It's a really good mix. And I certainly wouldn't say that that behavior lends towards men or women more comprehensively. I mean, I really don't see, and maybe it's because I live in Chicago and, in Illinois. I don't know. But to me, there's so many cases where, some emotion plays into this initially, you know, in many different forms. Some guys get served papers and some women get served papers, and they're all, mixed up. I mean, I think a lot of times what I see is sort of that stereotypical, I would say, gender rolled relationship.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of times when guys get served with petitions, and again, this is just a vast generality, but not any specific or whatever. If if they're approached with a divorce, I think a lot of the time the guys are sort of blindsided because they
Yeah.
think, look, like I didn't know this was happening. You were kind of doing that cup and the coffee example, and you didn't pick up on my hints. And, as a guy, you weren't able to process that effectively. And it's like, well, wait a minute. They're kind of like put on their ass a little bit, and it's like, all right, are we actually getting divorced? Can we fix this? And now they're defensive and they're whatever. I mean, I think that's a phenomenon that I see. And other times, the guys have moved on and they're just like, I just want to get divorced. I mean, when people, not necessarily guys or girls, um, when they are in control of the process, when they make that decision, even though in Illinois it doesn't matter who files first, it doesn't matter at all. But
Mhm.
if they make that affirmative motion and they say, look, I'm filing for divorce, the other side usually there's a reaction to that always. But I think the person in control, feels a little different in terms of how they're processing this.
Yeah, I think it's so different just depending on who reaches that decision. And I think even the setup on how it happens is often different. Like, I mean, I've dealt with gazillion different guys who have gone through that blindsided situation, and there's that sort of implied social contract, right? Where in the more like traditional setup, it's like, well, I'm the provider, I'm the protector, so I'm going to take care of the business, and then you're the person who's going to take care of the house, and you're going to take care of the kids, and you can be a stay-at-home mom, as long as I do my job and you do your job, there's no reason for us to get divorced, right? Because I'm providing the money and the house, you take care of the house and the kids, everybody's happy. But she's not going to be happy with that because you're going to be at the office all the time doing the work stuff. And unless you're bringing like the real value home, that's not money, but your actual attention and your positive energy and like that quality time back to your house, nobody's going to be happy with that. You're just an ATM machine. Who wants to marry an ATM machine?
Yeah.
And guys miss that. And especially with men, where it's like there's that combative period where all of these problems she's bringing up and she's fighting with you and she's complaining about it and all this stuff. And then it just goes quiet, right? Like it feels like it's peaceful. So it's almost like, hey, maybe we resolve this. I think it's been resolved. And a year goes by and it's like, okay, it's still been resolved. We haven't been arguing. And then the next year goes by and then she files. And you're like,
Hmm.
what? We haven't an argument in 2 years. And
Yep.
it's like, yeah, because she checked out 2 years ago.
Right. Right.
She's
Right.
just been emotionally reconciling this process to get to the point to pull that trigger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think guys pick up on that at all.
It's
Very few do.
hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard. I mean, and I think also it's like, I talk to tons of people, every day, every week, whatever. And, they're sometimes when they call me, they're not like, oh my God, let's get divorced. I'm fired up. Like, I mean, pretty much nobody does call me like that.
Yeah.
Um, but, people are looking for like a sign, you know what I mean? And I think actually picking up the phone and calling a divorce lawyer is like a big, big, big step, men and women. And I think anyone should be proud of just actually picking up the phone and rewarding themselves and saying, look, I had some courage to do that. But I always tell people, I said, look, not a psychiatrist, not a therapist. I don't know. Okay. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I'm happily married. I've got 2 beautiful kids. God bless. And the one thing I asked my clients or my prospective clients, I said, look, because they're looking for me to say, should I get divorced? But that's not my job. I said, march this out 5 years, 10 years. Okay. So when was the last time you went to dinner and like had fun and like laughed? And most people were, oh, well, it's been, like 3 years, 4 years. We never hang out. Okay. Well, to me, objectively, and we're objectifying that situation, that doesn't sound great. And if you are not great with your significant other, your kids pick up on that. And now they're seeing, they're seeing a modeling of what a relationship should look like, how mom treats dad, how dad treats mom, what their relationship is. I mean, you're kind of setting them up for other expectations and, maybe some difficulty in their life, trying to find somebody in their life. So I think I think that the bottom line on all this, Ryan, is like, we are not psychologists. And like I say, typically is, I mean, they call lawyers counselors, but I'm more of an armchair counselor. But I mean, like, look, I think the real implication of all this is like, look, divorce sucks. It's a fucking pain in the ass. It's stressful. It's a trauma. Nobody wants to divorce their spouse when they get married, period, end of story. Right? And I think, to me, with that, it's really how you process that moment in how you define what your process looks like and how you get divorced and what your future looks like. So to me, it's always when I tell everybody is like, got to get educated, got to get a support system. So guys, there's some great, and therapy feels taboo in some respects sometimes, but such a good resource, because nobody, guy or, man or woman or person, can go through this or is expected to go through this by themselves without some support. So whether that's a therapist, whether that's a friend, whether that's, a community, a group, AA, divorced dads, Facebook group, whatever it is, you have to find some solace in yourself to like move forward and be supported in that endeavor.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, God, there's so few resources for guys out there compared with women, or maybe it's just that women are more likely to seek the resources. That might be a different way of putting it. That's more politically correct. Not that I'm politically correct, but guys are so hesitant to do that. I mean, the way that we emotionally communicate is what, like, good, not good, and living the dream, which is like code for call the suicide hotline for me. You know what I mean? Like it's so one dimensional. It's not even specific, and being able to even like, I've talked to guys going through the process, and it's like, here's what sad means, right? And here's some actions that you can do to be
Yeah.
less sad, because it's the definition of it is experiencing a loss, right?
Yeah.
That's where sadness comes from. Most people can't articulate that. If you ask them what sad is, they don't know. Or if you say, what is angry? What is anger? And it's like, well, it feels like it's something is not fair. You feel like you've been wronged. And they're like, holy shit, you're right. I do feel like something's not fair. And I'm like, that's the definition of anger. That's why you feel angry. So here are some things that you can do to get past anger and mitigate that, right? And it's like using your emotions as a guidepost of actions and things that you can do to move yourself from anger to joy, from sad to happy. Like, you can do these things, but you do need help being able just to like pick it out and identify it as you feel it. Because for
Yeah.
guys, it's like good, not good. That's all
Right.
we got.
Yeah, and it feels elementary, but it's like, use this moment, guys, as like a springboard towards your like emotional awakening. You know what I mean? And the more in touch with your emotions and the more, you can articulate those in an effective way with others, with your ex-spouse, with your kids. I mean, that's just, again, we're talking about, foundational stuff there. And I think a lot of that time it's missed as time goes on, as people get comfortable, as roles develop. And I think it's kind of going back to the basics during the process and just using it as a reset and saying, look, what the fuck is good? What is bad? What is delivering? Like, let me articulate that. I mean, to me, that's huge.
Yeah, it's a huge difference, and again, it's like that call to action where, it's like you get into your car, right? It's a cold Chicago morning. It's freezing cold. The wind is,
Today,
16,000 miles per hour, or whatever it
today.
is in Chicago.
Yep.
And, you want to go and get that crazy 2-inch thick pizza, and you go to start your car and it doesn't start. And you go, crap. So then you put gas in it, and then the gas works, and you go, okay, cool. It worked. Then it happens again 2 weeks later. So then you do the same thing. You put gas in the car. It doesn't work. You're like, huh. Then you are like, maybe it's the spark plug. So you change the spark plug. So that doesn't work. Meanwhile, all this time, the car is telling you, the battery is dead, right? Right on the dash. And if you're ignoring your emotions, what you're doing is that you're ignoring that dashboard of like, here's what you can do to fix yourself. And you spend all this time on unnecessary crap when you could have just realized that your battery is dead and you need a boost. Like it's not that complicated if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Are you dogging on my pizza, Ryan?
I love it. I love it. I had
Yeah.
Chicago pizza like the first time, I think it was 2 years ago. I was doing a conference in Chicago and I forget where it is. And my friend will kill me because we went there together. But we went there and it comes out, I'm like, this is the first time I've limited myself to one slice of pizza because I was so full after. Like usually I'll eat like, half a pizza, not like half of one slice. It was insane. It was good
Oh
though.
yeah. Yeah. You definitely feel like there's a brick in your stomach, but it's good going in. That's
Yeah,
for
it was
sure.
it was wild. It was
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Chicago's a beautiful city though. I recommend most people go and visit it. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
it's great. It's freezing cold today. I would think it snowed like 3 inches last night. So there's a nice little snow cover here of shoveling this morning and whatever. So that's Chicago for you.
Yeah, yeah, right. Now, what I got to ask you because I love hearing these sorts of stories. What got you into the family law space? Like, what got you into divorce? Because, like we're saying, it's emotional, it's difficult. Nobody's ever happy at the end. It's
Yeah.
like I want to subject myself to this kind of pain. What got you into this industry?
I think that's a fair question too. So, and I would submit that most of my colleagues did not grow up when they were 10 years old and saying, "Hey, I want to be a divorce lawyer, mommy and daddy." Right? I mean, it feels a little like, I mean, you're right. Like, who would want to subject themselves to that? And I think what happens with a lot of people is they kind of fall into it in some respect. I kind of I had the opportunity to clerk for some judges even while I was in like college, and I was just kind of like shadowing people. And my cousin was working in the space for a while, and so at some point he just kind of like pawned me off to a larger firm, and that was like my myopic scope. And what I learned is not so much how I got here, but why I stayed here. And I think to me, it's truly one of those things where, I mean, it's like, well, when someone describes a job, it's like, well, I do something different every day. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, I truly do something different every single day. My day is, whether it's phone calls all day or writing all day, or I'm in court all day, or I'm helping out, Ryan doing a podcast. I mean, it's every day is completely different, which I love. And I also love that it's a people job. And, I like talking to people. I like sharing experiences. I like being relatable. I like, I like helping people when they're in a really difficult time. And I know it sounds maybe idealistic a little bit, but to me, it's like, look, it's nice to share those experiences and sort of be a light to guide somebody through, a tough trauma. And, sometimes I have tough conversations with my clients and they don't want to hear. And sometimes I'm their cheerleader and saying, yay. I mean, it's just like it feels also like a very thankless job, and it's really tough, but it's very emotionally and personally fulfilling for me. And so to me, that's why I love family law. I love, I hate to say it, I guess I love divorce, but it's just raw human stuff. And I like experiencing that and helping people, through that stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Incredible. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good point to wrap it up. I mean, with all of Jordan's experience, with all of the things that he's saying, I mean, he's specifically spelling out to you guys how to get through the divorce process better, how to come out of it better and happier and have a better relationship with your ex going forward so you can experience, those family weddings, the graduations, the birthdays, the Christmases, the Hanukkahs, whatever the case may be, as a family to some extent still, and be able to look across the aisle, which I think is beautiful at your kid's wedding one day and say, hey, you know what, we really did a great job with our son or our daughter or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I think that that's beautiful, and that's one of those reasons that I love having family lawyers like Jordan on this show, is to share that insight and to give you guys a reason to reach out to a family lawyer. And if you're in Illinois, definitely reach out to my good friend Jordan here, because what you're seeing is the exact qualifications of somebody who's experienced and can help you navigate through this process and get it done and stay rich in the process. Jordan, is there any way that these guys can reach out to you if they have any questions or
Absolutely.
if they want to hire you?
Absolutely. So if you want to call me direct, it's 312-262-2567, or you could email me at jrosenberg, Rosenberg, at beermanlaw.com. That's BEERMANN law.com.
Awesome. Please, guys, make sure you reach out and like and comment and subscribe, and make sure we'll put all of Jordan's links and contact information in the comment section below. So you have the ability to reach out to him to talk about hot divorces, baby. That'll be the next podcast that we do together. We're going to talk all about that too.
I love it. Hot divorces, and I just think everybody stay rich, not only money, but emotionally, and I think that's the message today.
100%. Rich in quality and rich in life. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And until next time, everybody, we will see you on the Stay Rich podcast. Talk to you soon.